not going to take a whole lot of time on the game in Lubbock. It was an exciting one. It was a close one for anybody that just wanted to check out a college football game. I checked in a few times, and there was a missed field goal, made field goals, and it went down to the wire in a loss after a 24-6 lead. Dylan Gabriel lit it up, especially early, but went through one of his dry spells as well in the second half. So, one of those kind of lost games for a team that's disappointed down the stretch, and people throwing up their arms to say, does it really matter? 7-5, 6-6, but that was the finale at Texas Tech.
Yeah, no, that's true, Mark. I think it's just a lot of the same. I think that we've seen throughout the entirety of the year for Oklahoma, just not able to play complementary football. And I think this is not necessarily just a this year. I think it's come full circle this year, but I don't think it's necessarily just a this year problem. But I think what's happened in the past, Mark, the last few years, that defensively the deficiencies that Oklahoma's had, they've had an offense that have been good enough by and large to overcome that. And so, that's not necessarily been the case this year as a team that is a good offensive team, but not, from a comparative perspective, not anywhere near as good as they've been, with some of the Heisman caliber quarterbacks that they've had, that they've had in the past. And so, I think you've seen again this week where the Oklahoma offense played, really well for most of the game. You'd mentioned there was a little bit of a dry spell in the second quarter, a couple of possessions where Oklahoma had an opportunity to go up 21 points. The Oklahoma had a fake field goal that did not work. Would have worked. I think Brady Willis is able to catch that. He probably goes in and they're up 21-0. Then they have another opportunity to execute a short. I think it was a 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, and then they have a penalty that backs them up and end up having to settle for a field goal at 17-0. And again, they weren't able to hold on to that lead. That kind of dissipated very, very quickly. And so offensively, you go into a game, you score 48 points, and I think 51-48 was the final, right?
Yep.
You score 48 points. You have 672 yards of offense. You should be able to win those games. And this is what I said on the post game show. 10 out of 10 times, if you score 48 points in a game, and really in regulation, right? Because Oklahoma didn't score anything in overtime. It was just the Texas Tech field goal. So you score 48 points in 4 quarters of play, and you should beat anyone that you play. And so that's the situation. The inconsistency on both sides of the ball this year is what's plagued Oklahoma. So kind of depending on how you look at it, Mark, if you're a glass half full type of fan or person that kind of covers this team, you look at this team and they were 6-6, but they did have 4 games that were decided by a touchdown or less. So you win those games and you're 10-2. And unfortunately, they were 0-4 in those games when you look at Kansas State, Baylor, West Virginia, and then this game Saturday against Texas Tech. Whereas the team last year was able to win a lot of those games, and that was the difference between their where Oklahoma was at 10-2 regular season versus this year 6-6. I think anyone watching have watched both of those teams would obviously say that last year's team was a much better football team than this year's version. So, but like I said, there's definitely a few ways to look at that. But I think by and large, there's a lot of relief, I think, and I don't know if you gave. I don't know if the coaching staff would feel the same way, but I think there's probably a lot of relief that the season's finally over. I think they're from a coaching perspective, you relish the opportunity for these extra practices to get some of your younger kids more time that don't necessarily get that same time when you're kind of in the week and you're game prepping and working on your stuff that you're going to implement on Saturdays. But So I think that's certainly a positive when you look at that. But there's a lot of things that were very unexpected. You kind of alluded to this in the open, Mark, that this is the worst season that Oklahoma's had since 1998. 99 was Bob Stoops' first year, and he was 7-5 in the regular season in that year. So the first time, and Oklahoma's faced with potentially having a losing season, depending on how the bowl game works out. And so I think that for for a lot of people, the honeymoon's probably over, to a certain degree. Not that anyone is, any logical human being watching this team and understanding the program um, is going to necessarily think that there needs to be a coaching change at the top. But I think at the same time, um, in as they prepare and they go forward with the portal and the recruiting season, and everything that kind of goes into that. I think there's certainly a lot more pressure on Venables in this program going forward next year, to see that improvement.